All right. Yeah, without delay, we can just start, continue the the second chapter, I guess. From where we left last time. So I think under the subtitle, the first recitation of scriptures, the four Nikayas or Agamas, and the Vinaya. Okay. Today, I guess this will be our last class in this year, 2016. Then we will begin our class in next year, and we will discuss something about that when we finish the class. When will be the best day for us, to continue the class. Okay. All right. I think before we continue, why don't we just have a little review on the. We know that it's quite different from the other tradition. I mean, when I say other tradition, I mean other religion in general, that how the Buddhist scripture been passed out. And firstly, I think there's no any difference to other religion as well. That almost all the old scriptures, I mean the earliest so-called the earliest saying from their saints or from their messengers or from Buddhism, I mean from the Buddha, are passed out from orally. But then there's slight difference. I mean, I wouldn't say slight. There's quite a big difference between the others. Is actually the Buddhist mass has been written down. I was not written down, been systematized and then being passed down from student to student after the Buddha passed away 3 months. I think that's really significantly important. And this is also one of the reasons, please bear in mind, when you read the Buddhist text later, I bring some of the text to show you. Sometimes you find their repetition there, or some sort of, looks like, yeah, please go. Sort of like, some sort of like a kind of, it's not really like literature, but it's really beautifully written in the original language because it's to shoot, the recitation. And also definitely the important messages, all like important terms, all important messages are kept there. So, I mean, people sometimes when people read the early sutta, people, if they're not used to, and then they find that when they read the so-called early sutta, what we're going to read later, like Agama and Nikaya, they always find it's very boring to read that because it's kind of like, but that's, it's kind of like, nicely written, but there were lots of things that why they have to repeat again, for example. That's because to shoot the memory, memory's purpose, okay? And for nowadays research, I mean, definitely that is a valuable thing for many reasons. One reason is the valuable thing is that they start to learn how the ancient peoples kept the thing in the memory, Anyway, so please bear that in mind. One of the very significant Buddhist texts, normally we don't have big questions like how the text come to us, like the Buddhist text, especially the early Buddhist text. There's no question because after the Buddha passed away, they've been kept in orally. But even though we also learned from the last reading that definitely there's a proof already that kind of like the one that written down into text, it was before Christ too, And then now, of course, nowadays there are so many manuscripts being discovered also. So, and then even some of the manuscripts being discovered, you could date it back even before Christ as well. So then from that proof, even though it's not mentioned in this book, we know that the Buddhist early text been written down, not only just passed down from orally, but been written down not only just in Pali tradition, and actually other traditions did the same way too. All right. Now let's, unless if there's any question, we just finish this page 42 and until 45, and then we can have a little discussion if you have any comments or anything or questions. We continue to page 42 and the third paragraph. Okay. So I think what the previous one was saying about how the Buddhism from the northern India to Sri Lanka, okay, and then did we read that one? I think we did, right? Yeah, you read that one. So and then it was carried by a Mahinda Buddhist monk who was a son of the emperor Ashoka, right? Okay, now we start to read something more about the Pali text now. Why, at least from this author's idea, I mean Rupert Gethin, Professor Rupert Gethin idea, why the Pali texts are important. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is how many other versions?
Yeah.
Okay. How many other versions or recensions of the canon of Buddhist scriptures existed in partially or more fully Sanskritized Middle Indian dialects is unclear. The Pali canon is the only one to survive, apparently complete, in an Indian language. Of the other ancient Indian versions of the canon, we have only isolated fragments and portions in the original Indian languages. More substantial portions are, however, preserved in translation, especially in the Chinese Tripitaka.
Mm-hmm.
This, along with what Buddhist literature as a whole reveals about its own history, allows us to know something of the content of these other Indian canons, and also to identify the generally more archaic material that must be relatively close in time to the ancient Rajagraha recitation. This material takes the form of the 4 primary Nikayas, or collections of the Buddhist discourses, also known as the 4 Agamas, or books of textual tradition, along with the Vinaya, or Buddhist monastic rule. These texts constitute the essential common heritage of Buddhist thought, and from this perspective, the subsequent history of Buddhism is a working out of their implications. This is not to imply that Buddhism can somehow be reduced to what is contained in these texts. One must understand that this working out, in practice, constitutes much of what Buddhism has actually been and today is. Nevertheless, in the quest for an understanding of Buddhist thought, these texts represent the most convenient starting point.
All right, okay. I don't think we have any question. Do you want to read the next one? Yeah. Oh.
Okay. Today we have 2 full versions of this Nikaya Agama material, a version in Pali forming part of the Pali canon and a version in Chinese translation contained in the Chinese Tripitaka. It is usual scholarly practice to refer to the Pali version by the term Nikaya and the Chinese by the term Agama. Like the Pali canon as a whole, it is impossible to date the Pali Nikayas in their present form with any precision. The Chinese Agamas were translated into Chinese from Sanskrit or Middle Indo-Aryan dialects around the end of the 4th century CE, but the texts upon which they rest must, like the Nikayas, date from the centuries before the beginning of the Christian era. Portions of further versions of this material also come down to us in Tibetan translation in the Tibetan
Kanji. Yeah. All right. Why don't we just continue? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 4 Nikayas Agama arranged the Buddha's discourse in the first place according to length. The collection of long discourse, Digha Nikaya, comprises some 30 sutras arranged in 3 volumes. The collection of middle-length discourse, Majjhima Nikaya, comprises some 150 sutras in the Pali version and 200 in the Chinese. Finally, there are 2 collections of shorter discourse. The first of these is the grouped collection, Samyutta Nikaya, which consists of short sutras grouped principally according to a subject matter and dominated by the subjects of dependent arising, the aggregates, the sense sphere, and the path. The oral nature of early Buddhist literature resulted in the proliferation of numbered lists, in part as mnemonic devices, and the numbered collection, Anguttara Nikaya, consists of short sutras built around such a numbered list and grouped according to number rather than topic.
Okay, so I mean the early sutta, or what we call the Pali Sutta, and then I mean I think it's quite the message quite clear that I mean even nowadays you might have lots of translation from different languages, sutra translation from different languages, but then the Pali, you know, they actually really retain one of the earliest version. And then mostly when we say sutra to the Pali, and in general understanding, it always refers to the 4 Nikayas or Agama, right? We have to understand in Chinese, Agama means Ahan, okay? Agama, okay. For example, well, but actually originally the word Agama, it could refer to mean passing down, okay? But then it become a language in India. Agama always understand as kind of religious scriptures or religious, you know. For example, even in Malay language, you know, the language used in Malaysia and Indonesia, they ask you, what is your religion? They say, what is your agama? Okay. Now, of course, because if you learn the Southeast Asia, they were highly influenced by the Indian culture in the past. So, okay. Until that, when the Muslim, came in, that's why in Malay language you had a mix of some of Arabic language, and quite a large number of the Sanskrit language, or you could say Indian language. So, but then in Pali, please don't misunderstand. In Pali, they don't use agama. They do in commentary. Sometimes they say what the agama say means the nikaya. Okay, all right. But the word nikaya, and then I don't know. That's how we usually use in Pali, because the word nikaya means like a basket, you know. So how many are they? Well, that is commonly understand. There are 4 of them. Okay. So one is called the long discourse, the long one. In Chinese called Chang Ahan. Okay, the long discourse. And then you have this the middle length discourse. So that means in not too long, not too short. The discourse are not too long, too short. That's what we call Zhong Ahan. And then you have this the collected one. I think here they translate a group, like a group it together. But they group together according with the important subject, like dependent arising, you know, like khandhas, and what are they? Like a vulnerable truth and so forth, you know, the path. So they group it together. That's what we call, in Chinese usually they translate it as a zha'ahan. But the zha, please don't misunderstood, in Chinese mean miscellaneous. Actually the zha, it's referred to, in old day, sometimes referred to connected to something, you know, it like, so there's a long research on why the Chinese translate the word zha. It's all right. But I want to say that's how you have one group. And another one that you arrange the sutra in according to the number. For example, number 1 is Nibbana. So what is Nibbana? So then you group the sutra in number 1. When the Buddha talk about something about number 2, for example, good and bad. For example, what is good, what is bad? What is seen, what is unseen? Okay. What is meant by the mentally good, what is meant by the mentally bad. So then they group those sutra into the number 2, like that. And then up to number 11. So that's what we call the connected discourse. Or no, sorry, not connected. That's what we call that numerous. They arrange the sutra according to the numbers. Okay. These are the, of course, and I think we don't have the English translation until, you know, when the British colonized Sri Lanka and in India. And then later on, that was started maybe 19 something in early century, 19th century, the last century. So they started to translate the text into English. You could say that actually that is, beside the Chinese, you could say that's the, what we have now, the most earlier translation from the Pali. That was in English. No, that's also wrong. Because when I say wrong, but actually in Thailand also they translate the text into Thai language, and in Burma they translate into Burmese language, Sri Lanka they translate into Sinhalese language, for example. But for English, definitely we start to have the translation from the earlier 20th century. Okay, that means actually 19 something. But then now this is the new translation again by American monk Bhikkhu Bodhi. So now if you look at this, is like this is what we call the connected discourse. You know, the whole text of it. I will just pass on later. You can have a little glance. You will notice that those basically Samyutta Nikaya. Okay, so the connected discourse, that's what they call a group discourse, is based on a 5 subtitle, main Buddhist teaching subtitle, and then The sutra is very short, and then it's been arranged into under that kind of subtitle. Okay, you can have a little glance. This is one, and then you also have the middle length. That means the sutra consists about 126, I think I remember, because I always confuse with 100 here, 152. So actually, this sutra, it's I think it's easy to read to start with because it's not too long, it's not too short. Okay. And another one, what's called the numerical discourse of the Buddha. So that's what I've just mentioned. Is all these are been arranged or passed out or arranged with a number. Okay, under number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. But they don't. Those sutras, unless there were few of them, otherwise they don't. None of them are the same. Okay, then none of them are the same. So that's how you can imagine. Usually, what we believe that if you want to finish all the long discourse, the longer I didn't put it, it's something like that. I didn't bring it all along here.
I have one of your copies.
You have one of the copy, yeah. The long one, okay. So, but you can imagine this is how difficult. Why? Comparatively, study Buddhism is much difficult than other religion. I mean, think about if you study Christianity, then they think, oh, we read the whole Bible. We don't, okay, but and this is just accordingly. This is what we believe is that what we call the earlier sutra, and then we are going to read later. I'm sure some of them, if you have read, and then you have other sutra also. So imagine how many sutra you are going to read. But don't think this is sutra is not important even for Mahayana. I'm just want to say that. Because actually most of the Mahayana texts are trying to borrow this idea and try to redefine something. Okay. So when you read Mahayana text, you suddenly know when he quotes something, saying what the Buddha say, and then you know all come from here. So, but I mean, unfortunately, lots of people who study in let's say in China, they come from a Mahayana background, they only learn Mahayana text. They just read it there. They don't know actually lots of quotation. For example, like the Diamond Sutra. 如化义者, 法应应舍, 何况非法. Oh, that is one of the very famous. In Diamond Sutra say, just like the simile of the raft, So even you build a raft and you cross over the other side, shore. When you cross over the other shore, you even have to abandon the raft. So certainly then you need to abandon even the Dharma. That actually, this statement came from Agama too. Okay? But it's a central statement in the Buddhist, like a Diamond Sutra, the Jinganjing. Okay, I will just pass down, you can just weight it, how heavy is it? Then you can just, I can just, maybe I just pass out this way, yeah. Sorry.
Why did they arrange them in terms of length? Like, what logical meaning, like reasons?
Well, I don't know, and I think not as far as I know, I don't know, but it's, well, I could only imagine is, but definitely for further study also, they also think that actually when we have the first recitation, mean the first council, and when they decided to recite what the Buddha's words. And there's some other research thinking the earliest one, it cannot be the longest one. For example, I didn't bring it to text here, but the longest, the longest discourse. The earliest one, it could be the middle one, because they quite suspect that how can they start to recite that the longest, such a long, like long text, at one row. But we don't know. But for sure that later on it become a tradition already. That, for example, if you become a monk or nuns under the master, who are traditionally they have to remember at least one of the volume, like a long discourse, for example. Then your job, if you're under them, your job is first learn how to recite all the long discourse, and then you start to recite the other. So, and the other also, they don't have to remember all, but that's how the later tradition, that's how we get from 5th century, the Buddha was saying that. Then the other, definitely there are other like the middle length discourse. So you might have a lot of texts are very important, then you need to recite. But then if you are under the traditional long discourse, then all long discourse need to recite all, okay, right. I definitely encourage you, if you're interested, you should, get one, of course, if you don't want to buy the book, you could always get one from, there's a lot of translation too, from website, even though they are not whole of it, but at least there are lots of translation text. Just remember the name, like a Middle Length Discourse, and especially the Pali name. And then you could, have a time, every time you just read one, not necessarily read one sutra, some are very short. At least then you have some idea, those are the texts. I mean, this is actually a very healthy way to study if you begin with reading this,
So like when I was reading the Chinese versions, a lot of them have like different stories and stuff. Is this the same thing? But are these just like 50 different stories, 150 different stories?
Yeah, but I don't know what you're reading in Chinese. There are so many, because the China is different. They start to do the translation. I mean, as later we are going to read, because in Pali they have a whole system there. But the Chinese at the time, just like maybe nowadays in America, then when they say that's said by the Buddha, and you have a famous monk come here, and then they translate, and they never question what are they, And then that's a good part of it, because then in China, then they started to collect everything. But then later, so the catalog even start from 5th century actually. Like Dao An was one of the famous Chinese monks. So the catalog have a lot of questions. So some texts sound like not authentic too. So what they have to do, and then they have to find quite a educated monk, and then to decide this text maybe should not include in the Chinese canon. But anyway. But so yeah.
Sorry, in Chinese there's like Hua Yan Jing
yeah.
and a bunch of.
The Hua Yan Jing belong to the Mahayana text. It's not. Later we're going to read here. Say it's not belong to what we call the early Buddhist text. Okay.
But when I was reading that, it's also like sort of here's a story and there's like conversations.
Yeah, actually, if you look at Hua Yan Jing, I don't think Hua Yan Jing is more similar. But if you read some other in Chinese called Bo Le Jing, they bear more similar to this what we call the Agama Nikaya. But anyway, if you want to read Chinese, and the Chinese have very similar to the Nikaya, then try to read Ahan. In Chinese, you do have the version. Same thing, you have the Chang Ahan, the long discourse, even though the number may be different. And that's the reason why in the recent scholarly study that we always compare. If you read Chinese and you read Pali, you do compare study. Yeah. But then you could begin with reading Ahan and just look for them online also. Yeah. Okay. We will discuss about the Hua Yan Jing later, because that will be in the Mahayana section. Okay. All right. How do you feel that when you read it?
Nice decoration on the shelf. This book size segment is just the notes.
Oh, I see. That's a notes. Yeah, yeah.
Pretty big.
But you have to imagine in those days. I'm not kidding, because I knew some monks, even now, are very old now. But now I don't think young generation do that. They really recite the whole text. You ask, they can recite that for you. And still, they retain a very tough tradition in Burma. If you want to become a so-called Tripitaka master, that means Sanzang Fa Shi, and they do have a title for them. So they have, every year, they have almost 100,000 monks go to participate in examination, and they will be eliminated. And then up to the last, every year they only give people almost just 5% every year. And then who have 1 Tripitaka or 2 Tripitaka and 3 Tripitaka master. What does it mean by that? Of course, now some Burmese monks also started to have a different idea, but they still retain the old tradition, is that when you say 1 Tripitaka, mean they recite the whole thing. And when they can recite the 2, that means the 2 Tripitaka. And the 3 Tripitaka, they can recite the 3 Tripitaka. They really can recite whole. Okay? And not only that, like some other sutta is very important, like at least important to Burmese tradition. So like Mahabodhisatipatthana Sutta, they not only can recite the whole text, they can recite the text in the reverse order. Yeah, and you know, they ask the examination like that. Even the teacher don't have a book. They will sit and then let's say you want to do one examination for the higher, and then they ask you to recite. Now, the exam is they pick up a set, whatever the sutta they mentioned, they recite, and then they will ask some other exam is that they just pick up from the middle, and then you start from the middle. You cannot start from the beginning also. You know that you can start from, if you used to learn recitation of the text, when you start from beginning, it's easier, right? And then if somebody just pick up from the middle, you need to start from there. It's very hard. Okay. Tripitaka means Sanzan. I think we just read that, right? Like we read that there's the basket. Tripitaka, no, it's not basket. You could, Nikaya is basket. Tripitaka is Sanzan. Or sometimes we translate canon, three canon. Three mean canon. Yeah, Pitaka could understand as a basket, but usually, anyway, we just understand it as a canon. Okay, usually we say three canon.
So Pitaka means has the same meaning as Nikaya?
No. But I think now maybe pretty easier. Pitaka usually understood as a collection. Okay. Yeah. I don't know whether there's a same meaning or not. Actually, Nikaya and Pitaka. That's a good question. I don't know. But definitely it's a different word. Okay. All right. So just understand, like in Chinese, say 善战, 对, 战, right? Yeah. Anyone read Chinese? Yeah, here. Yeah. 善战, 战, right?
The only thing I know about that is Shioji.
Yeah, that's right. So certainly it's an honor title to say that he is a master of Tripitaka. That means, you know, in old days it's very different. When you say you are master of Tripitaka or master of one Pitaka or two Pitaka, is different. Okay. You know, lots of people now use it loosely now. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. All right. Why don't we just go on? Today we have two full versions, right? Where we are? Yeah. Next one. So do you want to read?
44.
Yeah. Okay. 43.
I just finished reading 43.
We didn't cover that? Yeah.
No, 44.
Oh, yeah, the Nikaya. All right. 44. Yeah. I mean, we can start from here and then we can go. We don't have, yeah.
In this book, I generally quote from and refer to the Pali recension of this text. Using the Pali recension is in part a matter of convenience and not a question of thereby suggesting that the tradition it preserves are always the oldest and most authentic available to us, even if it is likely that this is generally the case. The Pali versions of these texts have been translated into English in their entirety, unlike the Chinese and Tibetan versions, and are readily available. That these texts have become widely known over the past century through their Pali form has sometimes led to an attitude which sees them as presenting the peculiar perspective of Theravada Buddhism. But as Moat pointed out 40 years ago, the doctrinal basis common to the Chinese Agama and Pali Nikayas is remarkably uniform. Such variation as is this affect only the mode of expression or the arrangement of topics. Far from representing sectarian Buddhism, these texts above all constitute the common ancient heritage of Buddhism.
Okay, no, any question? Really? Wow, all right. Why don't we keep on then? You have question?
No.
Okay, yeah. No, the second, yeah.
The failure to appreciate this results in a distorted view of Asian Buddhism and its subsequent development and history both within and outside India. From their frequent references to and quotation from the Nikaya and Agamas, it is apparent that all subsequent Indian Buddhist thinkers and writers of whatever school of persuasion, including the Mahayana, and most certainly those thinkers such as
Nagarjuna,
Asanga,
and Vasubandhu, yeah.
who became the great Indian fathers of East Asian and Tibetan Buddhism, were completely familiar with this material and treated it as
Authoritative, I think.
Authoritative word of the Buddha. When disagreements across among Buddhists, they did not concern the authority of the Nikaya Agama material, but certain points of its interpretation and the authority of other quite different material, namely the Mahayana Sutra, which we should return to presently.
Okay. Next one, yeah. You want to read? Yeah.
Alongside the four primary Nikaya Agama collections of sutras, the ancient Indian canons, like the Pali canon, preserved a minor Sutraka?
Yeah. Sutraka, yeah.
Collection of miscellaneous texts that were also recognized as having the authority of the Buddhist work. The fifth collection included such works as the Dharma, saying on Dharma, and the Jataka, or stories concerning the previous lives of the Buddha. The four Nikayas, together with a greater or lesser number of miscellaneous minor texts, constituted the basket of discourses, sutra, for the earliest Buddhist schools.
Could you just continue first? Yeah, not finish.
The Pali canon, Chinese Chipitaka, and Tibetan Kanjura all preserve versions of the ancient basket of monastic discipline, Vinaya Taka. The Pali canon and Kanjura, one each. The Chinese Tripitaka, 4, plus an incomplete fifth. All 6 extant versions of the Vinaya fall into 2 basic parts. The first is a detailed analysis of the rules which constitute the
Pratimoksha. Patimokkha.
And which govern the life of the individual monk or nun. The second comprises 20 sections, Skandaka, which set out the proper procedures for conducting the various communal acts of the Sangha, such as ordination.
All right, thank you. Now, I guess, and then we have to bear in mind in general, even though in general we said that the early Buddhist texts have 4 of the, what do you call, 4 Nikayas or 4 Agama. But then in the Pali, then they also usually claim there are 5 of them. So they put a lot of individual texts into the 5th one. So that, what we call, they put that and under the title called the Sutra or Sutta Pitaka, okay? And then like the most famous one called Dhammadipa, Fa Ju Jin, so it's included there. Then there are also many other, for example, like Vimanavastu talking about how people doing a good deed and they born to the heavens. And the Bedavastu mean people who was do the bad thing or were born in the hell, born to the as a ghost. And then the Jataka is the most famous, and like the Dhammadipa is famous too. Jataka is usually, the kids like it because it's talk about a story about the past life of the Buddha when he was a merchant, when he was a priest, when he was animals like a rabbit, you know, or tiger, or monkey, or something like that. Become a most clever monkey, most unselfish rabbit, very brave rabbit, and so forth. You know, I know, you know, that's anyway. And those are, but you know, but the Jataka story is really popular because, like in Sri Lanka, actually the biggest festival in Sri Lanka is the birthday of the Buddha. Okay, that we call a Vesak Day during the May, and they have lots of activities, so show, and I forgot the English term now. Paifan, I forgot now what it's called. Anyway, decoration of the light, and then you have the people speaking there with the light. They will tell you, now this is the story here, now the story here, and the light is very beautiful. And almost if the rich temple, the people will support that. It's a culture of Sri Lanka. So, and then the people like it. They hear different kind of story. Most of the story came from Jataka. Okay, so those we collect in one Pitaka called the Sutra or Sutta Pitaka. Okay, and you also have some other texts. What are they? Suddenly I cannot remember. Yeah, like Mininda Banha. We are thinking that next time we might be going to read that. Yeah. So, and those texts, yes, ask them to come in. So, like Mininda Banha is one of the texts, even though it definitely came later. So it was actually the text about the king Mininda. He actually was the Greek person, because after Alexander conquered the East, so some of the region left. So and then he was asking a lot of questions about Buddhism, and then it was composed into the text called Mininda Banha. It's a really famous text actually. I guess the text is so famous that everybody who have any question about Buddhism, especially from the early Buddhism, he had out already. And it's nicely that the monk called Nagasena, believed to be like Arahant, he also replied him with a lot of simile. So, and nicely put, like that also into the collection called the Sutta Pitaka. Okay. Some say that there are 15 of them, but some traditions say there are 19 of them. So that's another dispute. I'm not going to go further than yet. Okay. Okay. And then don't forget, beside that, the early text, then you have the Pali canon, or you have the canon, like a Sutta canon. Like even though the Sutta canon consists of the 4 agama or 4 nikaya, or you could say 5 nikaya, 4 agama. Okay. And then you have the other, it's important, it's called a basket of monastic discipline, that called Vinaya Pitaka. Okay. Vinaya means Lü, or Pitaka means Zhan, Lü Zhan. Okay. So that means the Vinaya Pitaka. But I think that other detail I just say the Vinaya Pitaka is divided into 2 parts. So one part is the rule, and the other part is almost like the proper procedures for conducting the various common acts of Sangha. Okay. So how big is the Vinaya Pitaka? As I say, that's one of Pitaka, you just saw the text, and then traditionally you need to at least recite one of the basket, right? One of the Nikaya. And then that is not enough, then you need to recite the other also. And the Dhammadipa we just mentioned, it's almost like everybody have to learn it by heart. Okay. Yeah.
So the basket of monastic discipline, is that also in like words? Or is that a tradition that like people passes along?
Yeah, it's a tradition, people passing that down. Even from, it's believed that, traditionally believed that it passing down, yeah, you need to recite that too. It just belongs to another category, because that's only concerned about the monk or the nun's discipline rule. And they involve a lot of story inside, and also some teachings, because something happened, and then the Buddha start to give them some advice what they should practice and so forth. So if you look at the Vinaya, let me see. Those are the Vinaya. And of course, I mean, in Pali, it's different from the Chinese. In Chinese, people are not very familiar with the Vinaya in general, because somehow not in the earlier time, but later time, so the Chinese changed the rule that a layperson, before they ordain as a monk or nun, they cannot read Vinaya. Okay, that's why it's not very familiar with lots of Chinese, but it's contrary to the Pali. The Pali, or you could say the early Buddhist understanding. The early Buddhist understanding, you need to learn the Vinaya before you ordain as a monk. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing, right? So those are the Vinaya texts. You could just left one and just have a little ground straight. So, I mean, is it volume 1 here? Yeah, it's kind of, and then of course that Vinaya usually, because like in Pali tradition, the monk will have 227 rules, and under one rules, then they will start to illuminate a lot of how this rule came along, and what happened, and then for example why this rule became first, because definitely we know that from the first 12 years when the Buddha started to have the what you call the community as a monastic community, we don't have the Vinaya because of some naughty monk create some problem. So that's why, of course, then you have a dispute. When they have a dispute, and then they have the rules set out, and those are the Vinaya. So and there are lots of funny story there. This is not since we're in America, I don't care. I could say that because I remember when I was in England study. One day, one of the American actually came from New York. He suddenly came to see me, very exciting. I said, why are you so excited about that? And he said, you know, I just read the Vinaya. And I say, when I opened up the Vinaya, I was so surprised that, you know, this text at least being kept 2,000 years ago, just say that even definitely was like written down before Christ. There are lots of pornography inside there, porn there, description. So he was so surprised. Said, look at our American history. We can talk about something really, you know, a graphic kind of thing. It was very late, but how could you have this so early? You know, because one of the rule of the monk is about sexuality, of course. Then there are lots of things about sexuality. Anyway, I'm not going to say that. He's laughing. So, and there are lots of posture and this and that. And okay, anyway. But maybe that's one reason why I understand some Chinese, because the Chinese culture in the past was so different. So they were so worried the lay people read those things. They would say, they would find so obscene, right? What happened? What it is about? Okay.
So like I hear like in Chinese people say like monks have all these like 戒律.
Yeah.
Is that the same as?
Yeah.
So are these like arranged? Because when I was reading the titles, the titles are not like this is like 什么什么戒. Like it's.
It is actually when you look at the title, the first one.
Some of it says forfeit, some of it says defeat.
Yeah. Those are because the 戒律 is, we have 227. For example, like the Parajika, they were under 4, but they were under one subtitle called Parajika, for example. I forgot English translation for what. Like they say the forfeit, and they have a different name. They put in the category of a name, like Parajika and then Sanghati because, for example, like Sanghati. Why the word called Sanghati? I mean, when you commit something, it remains. What does it mean? And then they will list out about 20-something of the rule there. So, and then the rule, they will say, for example, if you commit this wrong, you need to confess soon. If you don't confess soon, so, and then say that you confess what you have done wrong, you break the rule, but you confess later, say a week later, then you'll be punished for a week. When I say punish here, I don't mean slashing, we don't have that. I mean, you have a duty. For example, you need to clean the place for 1 week, something like that. So to show that you really want to correct yourself, like that. So that's why, when you look at it, it's true. It's because you're under the heading. There were 7 a big heading. Okay. All right. And then, why don't we have a little break? at least you can go through the book you have, because we are going to talk another thing called Abhidhamma. So we just have like 5 minutes break, I guess. We're back here by, by 8 o'clock. Yeah. All right. I see.